On this episode of Scots Abroad, we talk to a footballer that has represented Scotland over 100 times. A natural-born leader with a clear understanding of the tactical side of football and determination that has seen her professional career span 3 continents. You will hear about life growing up in Aberdeen and going to university there, whilst juggling a move to Scotland's dominant force in the game, Glasgow City. It was at Glasgow City where a new position was identified, and as a result, a fantastic career decorated with trophies and personal accolades, and eventually capturing Scotland to a World Cup. This is Scots Abroad with John Walker, and this week's guest, Scotland national team captain, Rachel Corsie. Hello Rachel Corsie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You are the third footballer, 4th guest on Scots Abroad, but you're the first footballer in these amazing studios. How are you?
I'm very well, I feel very privileged.
Congratulations on getting called up for yet another squad.
Thank you.
It's the Pinatar Cup.
The Pinatar Cup.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've just explained to me that you are flying back to the US.
Mm-hmm.
You're leaving
Monday.
Scotland in this beautiful weather we have just now. Going back to the US where it's freezing cold temperatures in Utah as well.
Yeah.
To then go to Spain, really nice weather,
Mm-hmm.
and then go back to the shit weather.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's a good thing you've got that Scottish, seasonal.
Just constant toughness of wind blowing in your face, yeah.
Yeah. Firstly, growing up in Aberdeen,
Yeah.
you come from good stock. Is it your great-grandfather?
It is, yeah.
So he has had a massive impact on any amateur coach who sits on a touchline with no protection from the elements.
Yeah.
Is this correct? Do you want to tell a wee bit more about that?
Yeah, so my great-grandfather on my mum's side, his name was Donald Coleman. His name was actually Donald Cunningham. We're talking back in the 1910s, 1920s. His mum actually didn't want him to be a footballer, so he changed his name and played under Donald Coleman, because back in that time, it was a bit like being a footballer wasn't seen as anything that you could probably pursue. And anyway, he was determined that he did, so he made his career. He was born down here actually, or Dumbartonshire. But spent a lot of time at Aberdeen, and he was not just a player, went on to then be a coach, and it was around the time probably where you just had to do a little bit of everything and make good of what you had. And so a story I kind of like to tell is and it's still there if you go to Todder Stadium, behind what's now been sort of MDF boarded up and redone in the dugout, you can still see sort of like an outline of brick, and he actually built those bricks to make a dugout. And Aberdeen were the first club to have a dugout. And yeah, that was kind of his idea. He was like, we need somewhere for the subs to sit. And he was like, well, I don't know who we're going to get to do it, but I'll do it, and put some bricks in, and they're still there to this day. And it's a pretty cool story. I think he was nominated for Aberdeen have just built their new training facility. He was one of the nominees to have a pitch named after him. There's going to be a plaque. They've just agreed. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame last year, and there's going to be a plaque put up on King Street, which is close to where Pittodrie is, and it was where he used to live. There'll be a plaque in his honour. So really cool, really nice sort of story, and one that certainly my mum's side is very, very proud of.
Yeah, and rightly so. So off the back of that, there is a family link there, but it is your great-grandfather. You weren't around in the 1910s.
I wasn't.
So there's
I'm old, but not
that. There's some people in between that.
Yeah.
Is it a very footballing family? Do you have older siblings? Your parents play football, or are they sport-orientated?
My dad played just amateur, coached a little bit after that. And my mum's a football fan. She's had a season ticket at Pittodrie for probably 30, 35 years. And there was a spell, sort of teenage years, where I had a season ticket too and went along with friends. But yeah, probably I have a younger brother who he likes football, but he tells me I've ruined it for him multiple times. Yeah.
By being too good.
Yeah, I think I used to just be like, right, go on goals, and just shelled the ball at him for hours on end, and he left in tears. But no, I think my earliest memory is my dad used to either go to his football or go and coach his football, and Saturday afternoons, if I didn't have anything on, I would just go with him. And I just can kind of remember Saturdays watching the game, and I would fill the water bottles or collect the corner flags at the end of the game, or chase the ball that would go over the fence every so often. And yeah, it just was part of my life, really.
So at what point do you start to try and get in on organised sports? So we done an interview with Fiona Brown, and obviously we tried to veer away from the differences between the men's and the women's game, but it became very apparent early on that Fiona Brown was explaining that it was only active schools if you were joining in with the boys or if you were doing other sports. What is it you go? Is it an active schools club? Is there a Stonehaven's women's team that you then get involved in? Or is it more of a progression, playing with the boys at school and then going forward?
For me, it was definitely just playing with the boys. I remember sort of primary school, played for the school team that was all boys with me. There was one other girl, I think, at one point that also played in the school team. And then I think I was 12, 13 when I first played for a women's team. And then actually at that point, I actually wasn't allowed to play the boys' team. So I kind of was sort of, I wouldn't say I was stuck, because I just never thought anything of it. You know, they were like, you're going into secondary school, and they were like, it's the boys' football trial. So, I mean, I wouldn't go. It's the boys' football trial. So then, you know, there was other things on. So I went to netball and volleyball, badminton, cross country. It was never something where I thought this is an injustice. It was just something that was what it was.
The way it was at the time, yeah.
And I really liked a lot of other sports, and I didn't have any kind of inclination that I would be on any sort of pathway to play for Scotland, to play Youth Scotland. It sounds so silly, but it just wasn't even on my radar.
And is that first team Stonehaven? Or is that further down the line?
No, there was like a year where there was a more local team. The school I went to is called Hazelhead Primary and then Hazelhead Academy. And we had a Hazelhead girls team for about a year that played under 13s. And I think that kind of came about because there was this transition of there was nothing after primary. So then we didn't have a team anymore. And I was fortunate. I had a really sporty year at school. So there was a lot of us that actually played sport, and it was competitive and it was fun. And some of those girls are still my best friends now. But no, I think then I went on to play for Stonehaven, which was just a youth club outside of Aberdeen, and was there for 4 years. Before then, it was sort of senior football.
What position are you playing at that point? Because this is like a heat map when I tried to picture where you actually played on a football pitch at which times in your career, and depending whether it was club or country. It seems to have varied every time I see a goal or a clip of you. I'm going, she's either moved position or she's terribly out of position right now.
Yeah. That at that point in time, I played centre midfield.
Right. Okay.
And then even early days of Scotland youth kind of trials and under 19s, I think I played for the under 19s for sort of 3 kind of seasons or 3 years. And first year I played left wing, second year I played right wing, and third year I played centre mid.
And so off at Stonehaven, Aberdeen have then picked you up.
Yeah.
What's the setup like at Aberdeen at that point? Because Aberdeen aren't really a team that I'm renowned for knowing as being involved in
the women's game
just now.
Yeah, no, they weren't. I mean, we wore the kit, but we had different sponsors, and that was about it. I remember we used to train. For people who've been to Pittodrie, they'll know that on a match day, there's this big, massive red ash car park across from the stadium, the main stand. And on Tuesday, we trained a Tuesday and a Thursday. And from probably about October through to March, when most pitches in Aberdeen are not really playable, we would be on that red ash car park, running around the traffic cones as part of our warm up. And I don't say that to kind of belittle the club or the work that was being done, because the people involved were volunteers, and you still paid to play at that time, and that was just where the game was at, especially the senior game in Scotland. And to be honest, I have really good memories of playing there. But then I was only there for probably about 18 months, and it was around the same time as me finishing with Scotland under 19s and then going to sort of senior women's football. And it was a time where I think if I didn't move clubs, then maybe my career would have come to a little bit of a halt.
What do you remember the first time you played for Aberdeen? So you're saying that you wore the same kit with a different sponsor, because Fiona Brown talked about that being a big a big step up when she moved to Celtic,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a big thing about seeing like something little, like seeing her initials on her tracksuit, and that kind of made her feel like this is like a proper football setup that I've never got involved in. Do you remember much of that, and then your actual first game for Aberdeen and who it was against, or is that like a total blur now in the...
That's a blur. I don't know if I've chosen to raise that. No, I really don't remember that. I probably was quite nervous though, because I mean, in my head, there was definitely no initials on my tracksuit. I think there was maybe a number that was half rubbed off, but I was an Aberdeen fan, so even though I knew that we weren't directly Aberdeen, I still kind of felt this is as close as I might ever get to playing for Aberdeen, and I'm an Aberdeen fan, so that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, so at that point, you play with Aberdeen, you're involved in the Scottish Youth setup.
Yeah.
Obviously, at this point, there is no real knowledge or thought of a women's professional game, especially not in the UK at this point. So you're going to university.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that cross in with the timeline? So I was trying to place this on when you'd went to uni and how you'd have managed to play for Glasgow City and Aberdeen, because you were studying up in Aberdeen, yeah?
Yeah.
So you're studying up in Aberdeen. When do you start university in Aberdeen?
I started September 2007.
So that's still when you're playing with Aberdeen, and then you join Glasgow City the following year.
Yeah.
How does that work? Because this is the logistical part that I cannot get. I coach football, and I sometimes can't get people to turn up from 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
To training. And I'm familiar that Aberdeen to Glasgow is quite a commute.
Yeah.
How is training working? Just even as just a normal training, how many nights do you train? Can you make training during the week, and how does that then factor into playing games?
So my first year uni was in Aberdeen with Aberdeen. Second year uni was then in the summer assigned for City. And how we worked it was I came down on a Thursday for training, and depending on what's lectures, like some weeks were slightly different, I would sort of stay to the Friday and train Thursday and Friday and then go home. But for the most part, it was I trained a Thursday night with the club, went home, and then came back down on a Sunday. So sort of twice a week I was driving back and forth. I was lucky that Robert Gordon University had a sports scholar programme, which I think most universities have one of those. So in terms of like my conditioning, my gym work, I was supported by them through that. So I had additional training, and then I trained on a Monday and sometimes a Wednesday with the uni men's first and second team, which again was actually really, really good. It was a great opportunity. The director of sport at the time, who again I still keep up with, Filippo Antoniazzi, he's a big football guy, and he was like, you need to come and train with the boys because you need to push your game. You're not going to get enough from doing one session a week, and I don't think you're going to get anything else from doing any kind of individual based work. So that was a great suggestion, I guess. And a lot of those boys that trained, played sort of juniors, Highland League, so the standard was very, very high, and that was kind of how training looked. And that was sort of similar for second and then fourth year. And then my third year at university I had a placement, so I actually worked. I managed to get a placement at Ernst & Young in Glasgow, which obviously I then go on to get a graduate job.
Okay, that explains that. At the point that Glasgow City came in for you, do you know a lot about Glasgow City, or are you just tunnel vision playing football for fun? Because I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast, and even myself up until like a year and a half ago, had no idea about the women's game at all. It was about 2017 when I started taking notice, and probably ignorantly didn't realise that there was this team in Glasgow that had won pretty much everything and just dominated football. Yeah. Did you know that at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that they were definitely the best team. I can remember from quite a young age they used to, in the Evening Express, the little local newspaper in Aberdeen, they used to, just have all the league tables on one of the sports pages. Yeah. And I remember from quite a young age I would always look at that. And then, so yeah, I knew that Glasgow City was where it was at. And then obviously from my time with Aberdeen and just playing against them, you could just see that they were far superior to anyone else. Yeah, and the time you join them, they've just won the first title of many in a row. So you're going to play in the Champions League or the UEFA Women's Cup at the time. Yeah. A lot of rebranding going on in the women's game consistently, it seems. Yeah. How exciting is that then?
Like, you're going from playing at Aberdeen, you've joined the best team in Scotland, you're still at uni, but you're playing in the Premier Cup competition in Europe.
Yeah.
And you make your debut, is it Masinac or Masinic? Is it the Serbian team?
Be.
Yeah. They played that many times.
That's terrible that I don't know that. I remember kind of that just being quite surreal. I think because it was the nature of where we entered the competition, it was at sort of a preliminary round.
Yeah, it was similar to when I've looked at the format, it was similar to the old Champions League where they had the double leg, the double league stage.
Yeah.
So you had a qualifying league stage and then a second one, and you just got through the first one and got knocked out at the second stage.
Yeah, typically, like, we obviously drew against, in our group, the best German team pretty much every year. So that was at the time when Germany were just such a dominant force. You just knew, like, you've no chance. But yeah, no, that was obviously a huge kind of selling point. And I actually remember, I think it was that same year, when it must have been the secondary round perhaps, but I remember getting hurt, and it was like a sort of a nervy kind of like back hamstring type injury. And so there'd be moments when I thought I was fine, you know, like I think I trained the day before the game, then it came to the game day and I was like, I don't think I can play. And I remember the manager at the time, who was Eddie Wilecki Black, he just turned to me and he just was like, you're just not mentally tough enough to play at this level. And that, which sounds really brutal. I mean, that is brutal, but that was kind of his way. He had a tough kind of way, which I think for a lot of the girls at the team would kind of stand up for the fact that he taught us a lot during his time there. Yeah. And his manner was very harsh, but was very honest. You always knew where you stood. And I remember just thinking, that's not what this is. Anyway, on my return from that was actually when I ended up going from centre mid to centre back, because he almost was still frustrated with me that I couldn't train, that we were in this session and I was allowed to be in the session, but I wasn't allowed to do everything. So he went, well, you can just go and be a defender for this. We're going to do crossing and finishing. So I had to go and be this passive defender. So it was just like ball after ball, like just crosses, like head it clear, get it out of the box, or like someone would score, whatever. Anyway, it turned out I was not bad at that, even though the drill wasn't for me. So he then was like, maybe you can actually play there. And that was kind of like the first sort of steps of me then becoming a centre back.
So in your first season, there's a date that I want to know if you know the significance of, or I've just uncovered it just by trawling through.
Wow, how exciting.
November 11th, 2008 versus Celtic.
November 11th, 2008.
The score was Celtic 2, Glasgow City 1.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the last time they lost in the league.
It's the only time you lost for Glasgow City. Which, just even for ego, is quite impressive.
It was at Glasgow Green.
So, they then, a few months later, moved you back to centre half, and then realised that was how you avoid losing. In the Scottish League.
To say that was the rationale of all of that,
but that's quite an impressive record to be able to say. Going, I moved to centre half, and then we didn't lose in a league game whilst I was there, which was another 5 seasons.
I'll take that.
The first season, clean sweep domestically.
Yeah,
full treble. 2009. This is where it gets a wee bit complex.
Right.
2009 is when they transitioned the league from autumn, spring to summer.
Yeah.
So there was a delay to start, but then it ran through the summer.
Yeah.
Only managed to double that year.
Uh-huh.
That's quite disappointing. How much of a transition was that to do? I mean, it does seem weird to me. You'd be down in tools for the end of your season and going, but we're going to restart pretty much in 7 weeks, 8 weeks to play through summer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, I don't remember it being that too much disruption other than, I mean, you just got on with it really. Like it wasn't, I remember there was like that little mini season that they ran just to be like, well, you know, the league finished whenever it finished, like in May, and then you had like a little bit of summer, and then we're like, okay, we're going to run like a mini league, so you play everyone once from September to November, say, and then we'll start back properly whenever it was, January. And I just remember thinking, I remember we still won that little sort of mini season. I remember just thinking there's a little bit more pressure here because there's not as much time. Like if you mess a game up, then you probably won't win the league, because there maybe at the time was only 2. I think probably Celtic were were probably the
At the
second
time,
best
yeah.
team. Yeah, you kind of knew if whoever won that game, us against Celtic, would win the league. So I remember there was probably just a bit more pressure, and then at the same time you're like, well, this is just a little mini league, so I don't know. And I think there's now chat that they want to move it back. So
Right, okay. Is that, I guess, to align with the Champions League? Would make sense to me.
Yeah, and I think it's just it. I don't know if it's a good thing to say or not, but it aligns with the men's season, and like whether people want to actually acknowledge that or not, you're in this culture, and people associate football as running from August to May. I think that there's more opportunity to kind of work with kind of the social media aspect, the kind of advertisement of the game, is if you can align it and it stays. I don't know.
I think it's a sharing of staff. I'm seeing a lot of roles for like analysts now that Rangers and Celtic have went professional. So you're actually seeing jobs crop up where it's a shared academy analyst role. So you're looking at it going, that could be an aspect where they're trying to use scouts, analysts, nutritionalists. Whereas if they have them all on the same schedule, they can all be shared and they can all have the same access to, because it's just been a neglect. They have the same access to the same people that the men do if they're running in parallel. So it probably has a lot of that. Going back to just constant success, 2010, 2011, more league success domestically. At what point are you guys realising that this is going to be a thing where maybe you won't lose again, where you might actually get to the 12, 13, 14 in a row, which is currently happening? Is there a feeling of that? Is there new players coming in every season? Or do you, at this point, just think it's a lucky crop of players that have came through?
No, I think, to be totally honest, I remember every year there was a lot of players, maybe not every year, but sort of around that time, 2010, 2011, was probably the beginning of the English team starting to maybe invest a little bit. And so I think it was probably around then that, let's say around 2011, 2012, maybe it was, that we started to lose players down south. And I remember that was, not that at the time you were like, well, this makes it exciting. You were sad that people, good players in your team were moving on, and you were like, okay, well, we need to step up because it's going to be tougher this year because we've lost some of our best players. And the teams, every team that was pushing, this Celtic, Hibs, the game of their season was when they played City. Like that, we were the team to beat. So we don't really have time to kind of stand still. We had to keep pushing boundaries, and it was around these times as well where things started to improve and increase. We weren't always, like when I first started playing, we played at Glasgow Green. Then obviously moved to Peters Hill. Since then they had time when they were at Airdrie. They're now back at Peters Hill. We went from training kind of the Thursday and the Friday to then it was, or not Thursday, Friday, it was Tuesday, Thursday, and then it went Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then they brought in a Monday as well, and then we were bringing in analysts. Like every year there was a continual kind of progression on, if it wasn't the players, it was something within the club that meant it was taking another step forward. It was pushing professional boundaries, and Laura Montgomery and Caroline Stewart, who own the club and run the club, it's quite amazing how they drove the team forward, because there wasn't a framework for them to follow. There wasn't like another club that they were going, well, they do this, or they just had this individual desire to, and they've always said this, we just want to have the best team in Scotland and we want to do everything we can to do that. And they started small and they just built it up and in a means that they knew they could. And
I think there is a wee bit in that with the a wee bit with the resistance to the announcements that Rangers and Celtic made 2 months ago. Yeah. Because you do maybe feel like they've had no currency in it for so long, but it's all right. We're the old firm, and I think there might be something to the league changing and the power that they have behind the scenes, where they can go, well, it would really suit us if we're going to make it professional, if we can just share all our resources and dominate something that we've not really been participating in or taken seriously for the last 8-9 seasons. And I can see that from within my own club. I can just see how the resistance is, where people are not happy about it. Yeah. And I do think that can, and that is what's going to be a bit upsetting. And I think it'll be interesting to see how City cope this year, because Rangers and Celtic have made a ton of signings from the other clubs around. Yeah. I think City have managed to hold on to most of their players, to be honest. But you mentioned Laura Montgomery there. Yeah. She retired in 2011. Yeah. Had you captained the side before this point? Because this is something that I couldn't find out on any of the research. Had you captained the team before?
I don't think so.
You'd captained Scotland?
Yes.
Yep, under 19s.
Yeah. I think around that time, Suzanne Lappin was still at the club, and there was a couple of other senior players who'd been there before her who would have, if Laura wasn't playing, worn the armband before me. So I think probably not would be the answer.
So,
there may have been a situation where,
somebody came off.
Yeah. But
at what point do you realise that you were being made captain? And how did that come about?
Wow. It was around the time, I think that year that Laura left, it was sort of within 6 months, Suzanne Lappin was named then captain, and I think possibly I was vice captain, which that was great. That got on really well with Sue. I think together we were a good little duo, and I think even that was an honour for me. I was delighted. I was still pretty young. I still felt there was a lot of players there who'd been at the club a lot longer than I had, and so I was quite delighted with that. And then I think it was either 3 months maybe after that then Sue went to Liverpool along with a couple other players, and I was one of these things that just was then I was told, but it was like you're gonna need to step up. That's how this is going to work, and so that was that. And
that was then you picked up a second treble, and then the following season the club picked up a third treble. But 2013 is when you suffer an ACL injury.
Yeah, the end of 2012.
How is that to cope with? A lot of what came out of the Fiona Brown interview, and a lot of the stuff that people were fascinated with that weren't even football fans, were just the injury process. This happened on Scotland duty for yourself.
Yeah.
And that meant, I'm guessing, same as Fiona, you were then protected by their insurance.
Yeah.
So what is the process? How long after the game do you realise that it's serious?
To be honest, I knew straight away.
Right.
The game I did, it was against Spain. It would have been we were playing the playoff game for the Euros in 2013. We'd done well enough to get to the playoffs. We'd played them at Hampden. It was 1 each. And then we were over there, and it was also 1 each at the time. I think it was about the 75th minute. It's actually, there was a tackle with a girl who now actually plays my club team in Salt Lake, Utah, Vero Bouquet. And she just ran across me, and we were on the halfway line, and I just was like, I don't fancy chasing back, so I'm just going to trip you up. Not malicious, was just, I'm going to stop you, and it's going to be a foul, and that's going to be fine, and I won't hurt you, and instead I'll hurt myself. But no, it was total freak. It was as my leg was fully extended that our knees kind of made contact, and I tore my cruciate. And you just know that it's your knee, and you've seen other players do it, and you just think this isn't good. So then stretch it off, get a yellow card, and then away I went. And that was the same game that we cruelly lost 2 goals in like the 120th, 121st minute, and that was us not going to the Euros as well. Anyway, yeah, we were in Spain, and so the doctor's looking at you and the physio's looking at you, and they're not able to tell you because they don't know for a fact, but they know.
Yeah.
Like everyone knows. So I think I went home. I think it was probably like a Wednesday or something. I think I maybe got the scan the end of that week, the following week, and then you quite quickly then see the consultant, arrange to get surgery, tells you the news. And that for me was a fairly quick process. I think I had surgery within 2 to 3 weeks of sustaining the injury, which could have even been sooner, but he recommended that I did some strength stuff just before we went in and did the op. So that was that. I think the surgery was something like the 5th of December, and the year previously I'd had surgery on the 4th of December on a minor ankle thing. So then around that time of year, the following year, I remember being like, just maybe have a few days off and don't do anything strenuous, because this is things come in threes. What's going to happen this year on the 5th of December? How
does this discussion with physio after that go? Because Fiona Brown said she'd done her cruciate twice, and she said the second time she was essentially told,
this might be
no more football for you.
Yeah.
Because this is now both knees are done.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get back to putting it. She wanted to be professional. I'm guessing you had the same desire at that point. You're going to put your body under immense strain going forward.
Yeah.
was that discussion ever had with you, that it was
No.
a case of getting back to running instead of playing football, or was it we need to get you back playing football?
No, that was never. It was just getting back playing football, I think. I think for me it's slightly different. I think both Fiona's weren't contact. And I think they say, then there's maybe something that's biomechanical whereby it's you're more prone to these types of injuries. Mine was genuinely quite a freak. Or it wasn't freak, like maybe I did have a weakness there, but because it was a contact injury, I think maybe my conversation was different. I think there's always a risk of that when you get injured. So, not that I knew that at the time, but I've since had a couple more surgeries, and kind of every time there's this sense of you just want you to know that we might not be able to get you back to where you want to be. That is, as you're getting older as well, especially. So I don't remember that ever being a thing. Whilst I was rehabbing was when I was sitting my final professional exams as well, and I think I remember that kind of gave me some sort of out, or they both kind of went kind of hand in hand, because in one sense I really had to put a lot of time into studying. Any spare time I had was just in the books constantly, and I think if I'd been playing it would have been even more challenging to get through that. And similarly, rehab is quite intense though. As much as you're maybe not on the pitch or on games, etc., there's a lot of commitment to doing sort of the daily things you have to do. But then again, on the same level, I could study and then go and spend an hour doing my rehab, come back to study, and then go and do a bit more of my rehab. And so I think, not saying I was lucky, but I think I found a balance at that time or period in my life where I felt I could do both and get through both. And it was what it was.
On the back of that then, how long is there between that and you realising that there's a potential to join Notts County and become a full-time football professional? So you've at this point you've completed all your accountancy exams?
Yeah.
So you're a professional accountant, and then somebody goes, by the way, there's an opportunity to play football professionally. See all that studying you've done?
Chuck it.
Do you want to come and kick the ball about instead now?
Yeah, that was a quick turnaround. It was probably, so November 2012, tore my cruciate and had surgery. July 2013, back to competitive football. Sorry, May 2013, finish exams. July 2013, come back to competitive football. October 2013, fully qualified. There's sort of an element of you have to pass your exams, but you need to have a certain amount of hours of qualified work. December 2013, handed my notice. So it was really, really, really fast, and the Notts County thing came about really suddenly. And actually, I need to give a lot of credit to the partner at the Ernst & Young office, Jim Bishop, who I still speak to. He's a Dundee United fan, so we used to argue about football frequently. That was our common ground. But no, he was the lead audit partner for the whole of the UK, but he was based in the Glasgow office at the time. And I remember he asked to meet me in his office one day at 5 p.m. and instantly you're thinking, I'm about to get fired here. Like, what have I done? Because he's the busiest guy. He's lots and lots of meetings, and all of a sudden he wants a meeting with me. And I was like, oh no. Anyway, really just wanted to speak to me about the fact I was now fully qualified and what was my plan, and had I considered professional clubs, and was there offers, and was I looking for offers, and did I have an agent? And he was thinking sort of outside the box, and he was like, what about in your contract? You need to think about what would be a tax benefit and what wouldn't, and how that affects you and how and he went through all these things. And truthfully, he was probably a big encouragement to me actually having the bravery to then go and do it. I think being an accountant, you're very much in the mindset of don't do anything too risky, just make smart decisions. And kind of at the time, like, the smart decision is don't go and play professional football, which doesn't really exist in most people's eyes.
Yeah.
Stay and be an accountant and have a good job and earn good money, and that's the smart thing to do. So he was really helpful, and he was like, if you don't do it now, you're going to get too far in this world whereby you're not going to be able to do it, and then you might regret that. There's
a really interesting story that Chris Bongard, who's been on this podcast before, he's an MMA fighter, and he was saying that he had a very similar situation. He was just working a 9-to-5 job, but he was also doing his MMA fighting.
Yeah.
So he would have to pull sickies to go and do training and go and do fights. And it just so happened that he was caught on Instagram by his boss
Oh no.
and got sacked. So he got the job taken away from him,
Yeah.
which was the point that he then had the decision made for him.
Yeah.
That it was, right, well,
need
now
to go and do
it was less.
Yeah.
So he was kind of saying that he was kind of blessed by the fact that the decision was taken out of his hand.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know if he would ever have walked away from making sure his mortgage was paid every month.
Yeah. It's
Now,
scary. It's hard to do.
So Notts County, they're even bigger. So they're going full time
Yeah.
in the newly structured league.
Yeah.
And they're also moving from the Lincoln Women's Ground to the Notts County
Yeah.
Men's Stadium,
Mhm.
which I guess as soon as that's sold to you, there can't be too much slot, I guess. Professional football inside a massive stadium.
Yeah.
What is the process?
I remember at the time there was a couple of clubs, and Notts County were just probably the biggest one that seemed interested. And I think in that moment of when you're a little bit vulnerable in it, I think that made me feel quite secure that someone was that, like they showed that they were most interested than the others at the time. And I remember the manager, Rick Passmore, he said, just come down and let's just have a cup of tea and a chat. And it's that kind of part of the world where like a cup of tea and just that kind of like warm feeling of like homeliness is quite a big thing. So that kind of spoke to me and we got on great, and that then became a clear decision. And I remember at the time there was a few people like, you're leaving Glasgow City for Notts County, are you sure?
Yeah.
And in my head it was just so clear, and it was a club that I felt like I'd get looked after. It was a stepping stone that I felt wasn't too big a stretch, but was still big enough to be like, you're going to play in a much better league. You're going to have much bigger challenges. You're going to have to adapt and change to professional life, which is different. It's got such a different look than what my sort of day-to-day had up until that point. And yeah, I really enjoyed the 12 months there.
Did you know you were coming in to be captain, or is that something that happened
No.
over time?
That was something that happened through the season. So I was named vice captain, and then Sophie Bradley, who was the captain at the time, tore her cruciate.
Right, okay.
So that then meant that I wore the armband. But
Am I just unlucky in how I've constructed these interviews? Is there a bigger issue in the women's game? Because ACL did seem to be, I think there was a Chelsea player when I was studying Fiona Brown's research, there was a Chelsea player that done 3 at one point, like in the first 10 years. Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
Is it just because there's so few instances whereby if there is professional players that you hear of, there probably is a link to an ACL that you're going to find out?
Yeah.
Or is it just so happens that I'm interviewing people and there seems to be ACLs following everyone's trail?
No, it definitely is a common issue in female sport, but I actually think there's so many things that could be attributable to it. A lot of the kind of biomechanical stuff is that females' makeup of sign of their knee alignment to their hips means they're more susceptible. But I also just think in the women's game, first and foremost, there's way less resources, there's way less management of people's load.
Right.
And then you've also got, you're trying to basically, when I was at Glasgow City, you're trying to basically be a full-time professional player. You're training as much as a full-time team would.
Yep.
But then I'm also doing 50, 60, 70 hours a week as an accountant. So that's not taken into consideration. That's just the way it has to be. And so I think for a large part, there just wasn't that ability to monitor and manage players as closely as perhaps there is in the equivalently top level in the men's game. But equally, I think you see a lot of male players as well have had that injury. It's just unfortunately a serious injury in sport. And when you do something that's, contact, a lot of speed endurance, a lot of change of direction, it's an injury that unfortunately will happen.
Your game changed from playing midfield to centre half, but that was a tactical decision based on a couple of training sessions.
Yeah.
Did you notice any change to your attributes with the knee injury when you came back? Was there anything different? Was there pace difference, touch difference, anything that had changed where you went, oh, that's not what I had before?
Not necessarily. I think it made me, since that, to be honest, I wasn't probably as vigilant with things like my training, my nutrition, my sleep habits, kind of like all the components that now I've been a professional for sort of 10 years, and I'm older and I've had all them operations. As time goes on, you start to realise, okay, it's actually really important that before I go out on the pitch, I do a bit of mobility work or a couple of exercises in the little sort of physio room to make sure certain muscles are maybe a little more switched on because they don't work as well if you don't do that. Or I understand that I need to be in bed and on a day before a game at a certain time because I know that that's the biggest part of my recovery. I think when I was much younger and before my ACL, probably I would say I placed absolutely close to zero value or attention towards that. And then as I've got older and as the games become more professional and there's more people in the game that have knowledge of this and you start to increase your own knowledge, I've now realised, wow, like I need to be doing all these things. And so I think in terms of my physical condition, I'm in a much better state now. But I wish I'd had, which I'm sure a lot of people say this, I wish I'd had a lot of that from a younger age because I think it's just so beneficial. And that's one of the biggest things I try and give to younger players when, you know, you see them coming through is you try and tell them, but you almost know they're probably going to need to learn this themselves. And it's unfortunately often the hard way. You know, a lot of people realise these things after they get hurt, but that's the way it goes.
A very successful season, as you said, personally especially. So you got Players Player of the Year, Managers Joint Player of the Year, but we'll just pretend that it was that you were the only name there and there was political reasons otherwise. The one thing I have noticed from going through your career, we'll go on to Seattle, we'll go on to Utah, we'll go on to Scotland, becoming more prominent, is, I'm not attributing this just to you, I know there's another back 3 or 4 depending on what formation you're playing, a serious lack of conceded goals. So in the Notts County season, you conceded 8 in the league in 14 games. Yeah. You did have a massive impact on the league title, whether you realise it or not, as you beat Chelsea, which was a game that they had to win to keep in touch with Liverpool. Finished 5th, good season. Were there offers to stay there, or did you know of offers in the USA and had that already turned you?
No, I had a second year in my contract, and then the opportunity around January came up to go to the US, and it was a really hard decision in terms of so on one part the US for me is the pinnacle, and it still is. I think the league is the strongest, it's the most competitive. Yes, I agree there's some really top clubs in Europe. If you look at leagues as a whole, I think the drop off in a lot of the top European leagues, there's still quite a big variant from the team who sits top to the team who sits bottom. Whereas in the US, it's just so competitive. I'm still trying to piece this together a little bit. Did the US do something when they restructured their league? I think somebody told me there was a lot of American players playing out in Europe, probably in Germany, because at the time it would have been one of the most dominant leagues. Yeah. Did the US, with the restructure, they demanded or encouraged a lot of the internationals to come back? Because it did seem like around about 2011-12, a lot of the top US internationals came back when the league got restructured into the National Women's Soccer League. I think the US players prefer to play in the US. There'd been issues in the past with their league structures where twice a league ultimately folded. And so when the new league started, which would have been 2012, I think was the first NWSL season, there was a lot of parameters over pay structures and budget and restrictions that all clubs had to follow quite stringently in order to make sure, you know, like if a league folds for a third time, you're kind of saying this isn't going to work and it's sustainable. So there was a huge risk to having another professional league, knowing that was at stake ultimately. But yes, I mean, I think all the US players, I think also that was in the build up to what would have been, that must have been in the build up to the 2012 Olympics, which the US players typically in a year that's a major competition year, they will stay in the US because they have a lot of intensive camps.
Right, okay.
So you typically find, you know, in a year where there's maybe nothing, they may go and explore other opportunities and broaden their horizons. However, they pretty consistently in years where it's major competitions, they try and stay as local as possible.
So were there more than one club interested from the US? And if so, was Seattle because of the influence of Kim Little, being able to speak to her, or was it just something you'd always wanted to do?
It's something I definitely wanted to do, and truthfully didn't expect it to be something that was possible so soon. Laura Harvey was actually the manager at the time, and I'd spoke to her on a number of occasions. She had come from Arsenal So that was kind of the connection there. And then, as you say, obviously Kim Little was there. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. And so I think that was what really drew me away from Notts County. As you say, I had a great year. I thoroughly loved being at the club. I was really emotional. I'm not someone who people tell you typically show emotions, but that's probably one of the hardest decisions, because, like I say, when I first went there, I was right. The values of the club was you look after each other. It's very family orientated. It's maybe not all the glamorous things that some of the top clubs that have a men's Premier League side attached to them can offer you, but it is more about the smaller things. And it was really hard to leave, but from a career perspective, it was just such an incredible opportunity to be presented with.
You've had 1 year pro, you've went to Seattle. What are the biggest differences day to day from going from full time, especially even going from Glasgow to Notts County, then Notts County to Seattle?
Yeah.
What is the biggest difference? Is there going to Seattle with types of players that are there in America, top quality players? Is it a step up? Is training harder, or is it just you being in a better league?
To put it to one thing's really hard. I think everyone's experience is different, so I don't want this to be seen as kind of like a blanket statement for all, but training was a massive step up going from playing here to over there. And that's a few things. That the quality of players we had at the time, there's people who've won World Cups and Olympic gold medals, and you're just like, wow, I'm on the same pitch as you, and we're, like Hope Solo was our starting goalkeeper, and you just don't think, if you'd gone back sort of 18 months, 2 years prior to that, I was doing professional exams and recovering from ACL. And now all of a sudden I'm getting shouted at from Hope Solo, which is terrifying. So I think there was also we had more players, at the time when I was at Notts County, we probably only had we had a smallish squad. It's like there's a couple of injuries through the week, and there's some people who maybe can't, and all of a sudden you're training with 8-9 players. Whereas now you're in what felt like just a more professional environment, which you would expect, because the US typically has more resources. It's a ridiculously large country. And
so what is the training difference? Ziggy Gordon spoke about moving from Hamilton to Poland, and said that the focus on technical work was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Is that something similar? I've seen Eni Aluko on Graham Hunter's podcast talked about going into training with Juventus as a 31-year-old, and being like, I've played at World Cups, I've won loads of trophies, I'm a fully fledged international footballer. And on the first training session, the coach had a go at the way she controlled the ball with the instep and not the outside of her foot, and had her doing that for about 20 minutes, just receiving passes on the outside of the foot. And she went, I'd never been spoken to like that, or taught that minute detail, where it was how I was receiving a ball and how it was going to let me run with the ball.
Yeah.
Is there that level of detail? Is that the kind of stuff we're looking at, or is it just intensity?
Intensity is one thing, because I think that's always kind of the difference as you go up the levels. It's the speed of play and the tempo of the game that is normally the biggest difference. So there's that. Laura Harvey's an English coach, and so her focus was pretty heavy on the tactical sort of side of things. There's some coaches in the league who are really, really big on athleticism, fast and furious, and that's understandable. That's their choice, that's their tactic. But no, I would have said she was more focused on the tactical side, and so training kind of mirrored that, and it was up to the players to bring the standards in terms of quality on the ball and the tempo.
Another successful season. You won is it the Shield you've won?
The Shield, they
but
call it,
but not the Championship.
Yeah.
It feels like it's the wrong way round.
Yeah.
It feels like you've won the League Championship, but didn't win the trophy. Yeah. But so you've won the season, best unbeaten run, most games won in a row, very successful defensive record. So you didn't win the Championship. It was Kansas, and your now teammate Amy Rodriguez that scored the winner.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
How does that feel? Because it feels like when we watch this, and we watch the MLS, the men's playoffs as well, it does feel like there's so much attributed to that end one-off game. And not the fact that you have won a league championship over more games.
Yeah.
How did that feel because I've seen Fiona Brown talked about almost like the cup competitions more than the league in certain countries that they've played in as well.
Yeah. That to me still baffles me. But yeah, I mean, the players will be like, we just need to finish top 4. And I'll be like, yeah, but it'd be good to finish first. And they're like, well, I mean, yeah, like, yeah. And I'm like, but you'd be the best team. And they're like, yeah, but you want to win the championship. Like, you don't get league bonus. You don't get bonuses for the shield.
Right, okay.
You get bonuses for winning the championship. I'm like, this is bizarre. But yeah, that's just the US way. And I think that was an adjustment for me. And obviously, say Kim was there, Jess Fishlock was another British player, Laura Harvey was a coach, our assistant was British. And so we won the shield. We were a lot more ecstatic than the rest of the Americans that were there. But yeah, they place a lot on the championship, and it's most things in America are about marketability and celebrations and how can they make something a grand spectacle. And so by having it build into what is in the end a championship, it essentially is seen as this kind of spectacular finale that they can make into a big celebration ultimately. And so I guess that's the American way.
At that point, so if I just go from Glasgow City direct to that playoff game, so that was 13,500.
Mm-hmm.
How was that then from playing at Glasgow City where the average attends 1,000 maybe? And then going from a game that's so highly watched that would have been televised as well at the time? How is that? Is that a moment where you kind of realise you go, this feels like professional football now?
Yeah, no. I think Portland, when we played so I think the game was played in Portland, where the Portland Timbers and then the Portland Thorns both play. And when you go and play the Thorns, they typically sell out. So even throughout the season, we played at that stadium in front of like 22,500 fans.
Right, okay.
And Seattle Portland is quite a heavy rivalry. It's probably about the only two. It's certainly the only two teams in the women's league that are close enough and have kind of history of a rivalry. So they really hate Seattle. So when you're there, it was just, for me, it was really good fun because that was the only real similarity between kind of American League and UK League. You had this one-off kind of derby. So I think throughout the year, yeah, like it's just great that America has that already built-in fan base and already has kind of a platform to promote the game. And there's a number of other games, and it is the clubs that are affiliated to the MLS sides typically, but the crowds and the fan base is just so much bigger and louder. And yeah, that game, obviously disappointingly we didn't win, but it was certainly a huge year for me personally.
And you finished the year by going back to Glasgow City for a loan spell?
Yeah.
Just to pick up another League Winners medal?
Yeah. I think I came back and played 6 games and ended up with winning 3 trophies, which...
It's not a bad winter break to go back to Seattle with after that. The next couple of seasons, it seems like we're maybe disrupted a wee bit with injury.
Yeah.
On that, is there a difference? So we're going from 2013, your first ACL, to 2016 when you're involved with a professional club.
Mm-hmm.
I've listened to the Rethink podcast, so your podcast with Erica, and you've had, is it Lyle Taylor? I want to make sure I'm getting this right.
Taylor Lytle,
sorry. And you were talking about injuries, and she was talking about the mental side, sports psychology.
Yeah.
Was that something that was a massive change? Or did you have, because you wouldn't have had all that, you were doing your exams during the first injury. You've got access to all that. How is the difference in that? Fiona Brown was telling us just a wee story about stuff that got her through was when she was in doing her rehab and used all beat training. You wouldn't have been there at the time. Or you might have been back on one of your loan spells. Yeah. Was she was moving all the cars around the car park just for fun and changing people's spaces and watching them not know where their car was. Just to be around the changing room.
That sounds very pure.
Did you notice any differences from being injured at Glasgow City to then? Yeah,
a lot. I think I don't remember finding my ACL recovery mentally that challenging to the extent that I was aware. I mean, I'm not sitting here by any means and saying, oh, it's totally easy recovery. It's very, very hard. But emotionally and mentally, I felt quite stable at that time. I was following a program I felt really comfortable with, the physio support, the medical support. I felt like I was really aware and in control of kind of how that path was going. And perhaps I was fortunate that I didn't really have too many setbacks. There's obviously little moments, where maybe you pick up a little calf strain because you haven't ran for so long, and then you go back to running, and, just those things are kind of expected as part of the process. This time around was really, really tough. I think one element is you're in an American system, which the medical system is very different there for one. You don't have the reassurance, the person who was doing my physio here had known for probably 5 years when we were doing my recovery. So I had a good relationship with her already. I was in a familiar place. I had all my friends and family close by. I didn't have that so much in America. And then to add to that, I went in to get a surgery that was only a 4 to 6 week recovery, and woke up after surgery in sort of what was a straight leg knee brace, and told I wasn't allowed to walk or put weight on my leg for the next 8 to 10 weeks. Right. And I was actually out for at least 6 months. So I'd kind of gone in for a tidy up that meant I was maybe going to miss 1, maybe 2 league games. And in the end, my whole year was finished. So I think that added to just the whole mental strain of everything. I remember at the time being like, okay, well, this is what it is. Just get on with it, crack on. But can't change it now. But there probably was something a little more subconscious that was just grinding away at me to be like, this actually is really crap. And there's going to be days where you're going to feel like that.
Is there any advice you would give for people going for injuries? Is there anything that you would implement? There was just something, I think, there used to be an old thinking that some managers didn't want injured players around the change room because it affected the mood because they felt bad. But I mean, I'm not attributing this to Arsene Wenger in any way, but he was the first person I ever heard, because I follow Arsenal, speaking about Jack Wilshere mainly, and how he wanted his injured players to at least be in the gym at the same time the players were doing their gym work, because it kept them feeling like they were part of the team and they weren't just stuck away trying to recover themselves. Is that something that happens in the women's game as well now, where you are encouraged to maybe be in the gym at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I remember through that period that I was in most mornings the same as all the other girls, and I think there's pros and cons of that, because I think there's definitely a huge element of I felt very involved, but then there equally can be the opposite, where there's days like feel really involved, like it's great to be here, we're doing the gym, and then you're all going out in the pitch and I'm like, that's actually, I don't actually want to be in the gym, I want to be on the pitch. So I think for me, I probably needed to find a balance of not maybe being in all the time. I think maybe his philosophy of being in the gym when the other players are in the gym, that might be, twice a week. So that's good that you maybe know that on a Tuesday and a Thursday afternoon, you're doing a team session and you still kind of feel connected, but maybe the other days you still get that break. I think I probably tried to do everything and just be like, no, I'm fine. I want to be part of this. But in actual fact, I think it was really, really tough.
Did the injuries have any impact on the Seattle time coming to an end, or was it Laura Harvey moving on and you kind of knew that you were going to be picked up again, or did it just happen?
No. So the surgery that I did have actually didn't work that first in 2016. So then for the most part 2017, which was Laura's final year, I was pretty much hurt the whole way through. I was really struggling. I mean, we went to the Euros that summer and I was kind of probably about 4 out of the 5 to 6 weeks building up to the Euros, I was completely off feet training. I wasn't running at all.
Right,
I just wasn't allowed any load through my knee. I had quite severe bone bruising that was just you can do something, but it's going to hurt after a while and it's going to hurt for a few days. And then so at the Euros, it was I'd play, then the next day I wouldn't be able to get out of bed really, it was so sore. The day after that I'd be able to walk, but I wouldn't be allowed to train, so I'd have to just be at training, but I'd just be watching. And then I think there was another day, so then that day I was like, okay, you can put your boots on, but you're only allowed to do the warm-up and passing, and then you have to watch the shaping work. And then it would be game day again, so I'd go through that routine. And then, so I just couldn't wait for 2017 to end. And then I came home actually and saw part of the women's football is funded through the Institute of Sport, which largely supports a lot of the home-based players whose clubs, maybe aren't able to provide some of the additional support services. So I saw the medical team here, saw the doctor, the physio, and they were like, this needs a surgical repair. The surgery you had hasn't really worked and you've tried to persevere, but ultimately we probably need to actually take some form of action. So we did that. I had the surgery in January 2018, and I remember it was 2 days after surgery, the owner of Seattle called and said, we're looking to probably release you. We don't see you part of the plans, which in the circumstances, that was just a brutal moment. And I could have, because I was injured, legally the club is obligated to make sure you get back to fitness.
Yeah.
But had I kind of pursued that and dug my heels in, then I would have ended up, they would have released me in March, and I would have been probably in a worse place, because then I wouldn't have been able to go anywhere in Europe, because I would have missed the transfer window. And it was just, in the moment, it was just so much to think about, and not what I'd hoped would kind of happen. And realistically, actually, I remember I changed my CV. I was probably ready to be like, this actually might be the end. Like, I don't want it to be, and I'm still going to cling on. I'm going to do my rehab. I'm as well doing my rehab just for the fact that I want to be able to do sport at some point in my life. But I don't know. I really questioned if I would actually ever be able to play. So anyway, we left on amicable terms. I agreed to be released. But I'd asked, would you be able to just fly me back to Seattle? Because at this point I was still in the UK. Could you fly me back to Seattle? Because I still have a lot of stuff there. And it would have been part of my contract had I been staying. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. So the week that was chosen happened to just align with the first week of pre-season.
Okay.
In the US. And I remember I was actually coaching. I did a little bit of coaching whilst I was in Seattle. And I remember I was coaching and my phone went, and I had my Apple Watch on, so it was like I could tell that it was someone. And I'm trying to like slyly look, thinking that's unusual, someone's phoning me, blah blah blah. And it's Laura Harvey, and I'm like, that's really weird. So it was towards the end of the session, so I was like, right. There's two girls. I said, go and collect the balls in. We'll finish with a bit of shooting. And I quickly answered, and I said, Laura, I'm just coaching for 10 minutes. I'll phone you back when I'm done. She was like, yeah, phone me back immediately. And I was like, okay. And I'm kind of in the back of my head, I'm like, can only be one reason that she's phoning. Anyway, she pretty much told me that I was getting on a flight at 4 p.m. and she would like me to be at training tomorrow. And I was only 5 weeks post-op, so I wasn't really allowed to be at training. So I phoned my physio back home, and I was like, James, I've just been told I can go to this club, and it's kind of a lifeline at this point because I've been doing my rehab, and there's been interest, but everyone's like, well, we need to see where she's at after recovery and blah blah blah. And I was like, I need to go. And he was like, oh, you're really putting me in a position here. And I was like, I know. And he was like, look, I'm going to send them a report because I need to do that, and I need to do it for you. And I was like, yeah, you can do that. And he was like, but I'm going to say that you're in a really good place, and I believe you are, and I think you can do most of the session. So anyway, I went, I flew, and was there sort of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I flew back home because there was national team commitments at that time. And whilst I was on national team duty, I was sent through a contract, and the rest is history.
And that was you joining the Utah Royals?
Yes.
So reconnecting with Laura Harvey, who was your coach at Seattle. Yeah. 3 seasons, so you talked about having to finish top 4. It's 3 seasons you finished just outside. Yeah. just outside those playoff spots. Brutal. And amongst that, there's been a off-season loan spell to the A-League in Canberra. Mm-hmm. How does that come about? Because this is something that I've noticed with Claire Elmsley's just won the league in Australia. How does that come about? Because it seems like an awful lot of players. Like if I even look at your team's roster, there's about 7 people out just now playing in Melbourne. Yeah. Is that a common thing to go and do?
Yeah, it's pretty much the only league that aligns with the NWSL, and so the only other option is to then have this big long break, which I've obviously kind of had over these last few months. It's sort of the perfect fit, and it kind of varies each year. It depends, when the US season finishes and when the other season starts, and every kind of season they both seem to just slightly move 1 week here, 1 week there. But yeah, I felt because we were going into a World Cup here, I didn't want to take a break. And so, that opportunity came around. I think it was actually I played centre back with Kendall Fletcher when I was part of my time at Seattle, and she actually now lives in Canberra. She's over there studying. She's an American player, doesn't play anymore. But she'd said, I think you'd love it. I think you'd love it at Canberra, and I know Heather, the coach, and she wants to speak to you, and yeah, so that worked out. I had a great time. It's not quite as demanding as the US League is. There's not quite as much travel. There's a lot of the players are a bit younger, so it's still at a developmental phase, I'd say. But it's a really, really good sort of platform to kind of spend your off season, get games in, get good training. It's nice and sunny. There's a beach in most cities.
I guess so. We've talked about this a wee bit. The reason you've qualified for this was because you are a Scot playing abroad.
Yeah.
It's maybe less so in the women's game because the opportunities to play professionally are outside the country. Do you think there's any reason why so few players tend to leave the UK? Like even in any game, a lot of people do seem to go down to England as opposed to maybe going and trying a different culture.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe different for yourself. You've went and joined, as you said, the elite league, the best league in the world. Do you think there is a reason that so few go? Because it can't be opportunity, because there's players like, I know Kim Little's now back at Arsenal, but she went and was very successful over in America.
Was, yeah.
Do you have, or is there any advice you would give people to go and try different cultures?
I would just always strongly recommend it, but I think the hardest challenge is it's a hugely brave decision because it is a different culture, and I think naturally we all kind of like what we know. You know, we all kind of like to know that when we're doing something with something that we can just fall back on. And I think, and I'm not meaning this to discredit anyone who plays down south, but you know that when you go to England, it's a stepping stone that you still know there's small, home comforts, like, the supermarket, you're going to get the things that you like to eat, what's on TV on a Saturday night, and they sound small, trivial things, but when you actually think about it, those are sort of the home comforts that often a lot of us do kind of place a lot of importance on in terms of if we're having some downtime. Those are the things that we like to do, and so I think that probably plays the biggest part in it. And now there's opportunities within the UK whereby players are able to have a prosperous career, make good money, and be able to do that. And I feel the biggest thing I just think if you go abroad, there's so many people you meet, there's so much you learn from just opening your mind up to different cultures. And I think that for me has probably changed me the most and had the biggest impact on me. I think it's made me change who I am for the better. I think people would have said before I'd left, I was quite a critical and pessimistic type person.
That's because you're Scottish.
Yeah, deep rooted in me. But I feel like it's allowed me to be open-minded, and now I would say I'm far more positive, I'm far more aware, I'm more emotionally aware, and I just think it broadens the opportunities that may come. And I've travelled a lot, and I think that's a pretty cool thing to have done. I've been to some really amazing places that I, again, otherwise probably wouldn't have gone to. And, I think there's, you're not going to play football for the rest of your life. And so there's a small window of time whereby I think you have to make the most of the opportunities that present themselves. And for me, I would say to anyone who gets the chance to go over there that they should absolutely take it. And it's a big decision. The day that you actually go to the airport and get on that flight, it's very, very scary, absolutely no doubt. But now I've done it, I always just think I can be home within 15, 20 hours.
Yeah.
Like no matter what, like I can get home relatively quickly, and I live halfway around the world. So
that is your club journey.
Yes.
And why you qualify for Scots abroad. But now we want to go on to the bit that's probably everyone knows you from, is being a Scotland international.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's just a dream at the point when you start. 2008 is when you first played for the under-19s in the tournament in France, I believe. Was that the first time you captained the under-19s?
Yeah, I was captain then. First time I played, I think, 2006.
Who was the manager at that point? And again, I'm trying to dive into what the discussions around you being captain were, because this seems like something that has followed you everywhere you've went, whether it's been instantly, like at Notts County when stuff's happened, or it's been something gradual when you took over from Laura. Is it something you realised you had, or is it just something you've kind of noticed as people have noticed it and you've went, oh, I'm a leader? I've seen you do the mic'd up stuff for Utah Royals and you don't stop talking to all the young players. No, but I mean, it's the positive. There's a coach there as well where a lot of the young players, you're pulling them, and whilst this discussion's been had or something else is going on, you are explaining what the session's happening. You're not taking the session. But there is clearly a leadership quality going on. Is that something that was you picked up from other people, or was it maybe just something you had ingrained in you?
I think it's something that I've certainly developed over time, but I guess there probably was, maybe it is in part a little bit of who I am. I think as I've got older, there's as much as I've worked on it, there's also the fact I play in that type of role where as a defender, as a centre back, a huge part of your role is communicating.
Yeah.
And I think there's not that many other positions that rely on it as heavily. And then it's the type of thing you then get in a habit of doing. And it doesn't just extend then to communicating in terms of your position and the person beside you, left or right, in front, behind, whatever. It's then, it kind of just expands across everything, and then in training sessions, like you say, I always would try and just make the most of the time. If there's something I think I can tell someone, and likewise I would want them to do the same to me. If there's a little bit of information that helps us play better, then let's share it. And that's kind of something that I've learned actually just gives me the best chance of being a better player. Like when you're playing against some of the best players in the world kind of every week, you need all the help you can get in some games. So I'm like, let's just talk as much as we can, because let's try and be the best partnership. And I think that's just a big part of then that leadership that a lot of coaches see, and they think we need someone who can communicate. And I think also in the US, my Scottish accent stands out.
You played 16 times for under-19s, scoring twice. 5th of March 2009 is when you're getting your first call up to the Scotland A squad. How does that happen back then? Is it a phone call? Is it a text?
I think you get an email the day before it's publicly released, and it's essentially you get sent an email from the administrator, just says congratulations, you've been selected, and then there's a document attached that basically has a list of players that have been selected, and then meeting time you'll be dispersed at the end of the trip, hotel you're staying at, and some other information.
What do you remember of the game?
Against France?
Yeah.
Truthfully, I remember being in camp, and it was the morning of the game, and we got the team and I kind of didn't really have, it was my first camp, so you kind of have no you don't think, oh, probably start. So I remember just going into the meeting, just being like, this is cool, like first game day, and my name was on the team. And I think I was like, okay, this is it then. You're playing one of the best teams in the world in your first Scotland game. I think the score was 3-0. I think it was just, I just remember being so proud. Like it was just, even though we lost, I think it was just so, it was like a special moment to just have that first game. Like as I say, I hadn't ever really thought I was even going to be in that pathway, and it was only probably in my final year at 19s I thought, you know what, I do really want to get there. I do think I can, and it was a little bit surreal, and I think it's a game that you'll probably always remember, even though I don't remember too much of the game, but I can still kind of relate to the emotions that I felt, certainly when I first knew I was going to be playing. And then once you get into the game, it's just like game mode happens and you do what you do.
What position did you start in that game?
Centre back.
So you started centre back in that game. So there seems to be a lot of changing about, because I've watched a lot. So you scored a lot of goals early on in your Scotland career. Yeah.
All at centre back.
All at centre back.
There was a spell probably around, what would it have been?
2014, 15?
Yeah, maybe 15, 16, where I played occasionally in centre mid.
Yes. That would explain a lot of these goals that I've seen. Do you have, so you scored your first goal against Northern Ireland?
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
I remember that, yeah. It was a bit of a sclaff. It was like, I think, second phase from a corner, and I celebrated like it was a 30-yard.
But then there was a flurry of goals. There was a couple of goals where you'd scored on back-to-back international breaks. You scored over 4 those. What would you say your best Scotland goal is? I hope it's the same one I've got noted here.
Oh no. Oh, my best goal.
You scored 2 in 90 seconds.
Really?
I'm glad I've done my research.
Was that at Motherwell?
No.
What about home or away?
You were away.
Oh gosh. Oh, I scored again. I don't even remember who it was.
Do you know the goal? Do you remember the goal
Yeah,
though?
it was outside the box.
Outside the box, curled into top corner against Macedonia.
Yeah, see, to be honest, I think the camera angle does me some favours there, but yeah, I'll take that. Yeah.
Is there a better goal then?
No, probably not. There's definitely not that many from outside the box. There's another one that I scored, and it was against Finland. I think in a friend. I think we won something like 7-2, and it was I'd scored just after half time because this is quite typical. My mum and dad were still at the buffet in hospitality, hadn't quite made their way back to their seats, and so it was literally still probably like 46 minutes at the latest. And it was like second phase, but to be fair, it was a bit of a shin roll, but it did sort of like lob the keeper, and it was probably from about 20 yards. It was also probably up there.
And I think you'd said previously one of the highlights was the England game that you won 2-0.
Yeah.
What do you remember that game? You were captain
Yeah.
for that game. How did that come about? Because you weren't the international captain at that point, were you?
No. So I think it was similar. It was sort of this time of year, just when there's always sort of an international friendly tournament on, and we went to Cyprus for a number of years in a row, and I think it was Cyprus Cup, and it was the second game, and so typically a lot of the team from the first game to the second game often changed quite a lot, and so Gemma must have not been in goals, and perhaps
she decided 200 caps was enough.
yeah, and probably that would have made sense that Iffy, who was frequently my other centre back partner, she can't have been playing maybe that day either, and she would have probably been the next in line, so I was fortunate that I was up.
You talked about the injuries in 2015 and 16 and how you managed to get back for Euro 2017, so it's Scotland women's first ever major tournament. What do you remember of the draw being done? Do you remember when you get drawn against England? Or is it a similar thing where maybe it's not as much, there's not as much hype? I mean, I remember the women's draw for the World Cup this time round because it was a big deal that Scotland had qualified. Do you remember how you found out you had England? Are you guys keeping an eye on it, or do you just again get an email and say this is a group? By the way,
yeah, no, we have a group chat, and normally somebody in the group chat's watching it, you know, team for team as it's drawn out the hat. So, I think that was probably how I would have known. I certainly would have known the day of the draw. I typically, I don't know, I guess it's maybe like an anxiety thing, but I like to not watch it and just see the end result. Like, right, I don't need to know, okay, you've got this team, and then wait like 8-9 minutes. Okay, you've also got this team. I just want to see it all in one, like, what is it? So yeah, I think that was certainly a point of, we've qualified for the first major tournament, so we don't care who we get, like, give us anyone. Let's just go and have the best time and give our absolute best, which is a given. You know, I don't mean that in terms like don't take it seriously. You know that everyone's doing absolutely everything to be in the best shape they can be in, to be prepared as much as they can, but there also needs to be that element of it needs to be enjoyable, especially given what that actually meant to have made it. Yeah.
Disappointing results against Portugal and England. Were you playing centre half in those games, or were you playing in front of the back four?
In front of the back four.
Good, because this is what it was. It's like trying to watch and piece together because it's really hard to get the stats on it.
Like, what is she doing there?
But for the final game, you were moved to centre half,
yeah,
and that was at the time that was going to be Anna Segal's last match in charge. Did you know that at the time that she was going to leave?
Yes, the team did know that was going to be her signing off.
How did that come about? Did she how has she told everyone? Because she's been a massive influence on. I mean, she didn't just manage Scotland; she was in charge of putting down a full criteria of how the women's game would work.
Yeah.
If I guess people followed her rulebook,
Mhm.
and I mean it seems to have come to fruition just now. There's a couple of things from that. So it was her last game, Scotland's first win at a major tournament for God knows how many years, since Switzerland in '96.
Yeah.
And it's also Gemma Faye's last match.
Mhm.
Did she tell you that before the game?
No.
Or did she decide after the tournament?
I think that came after, because there was a few other players there was Leanne Ross, Ifeoma, who hadn't categorically said, hadn't been announced, but it had been spoken about, kind of. I don't remember how we first found out that Anna wasn't renewing her term. I think I don't know if it goes in like a 2-year or 4-year, maybe it depends, I don't know. I don't know why we knew that, but we definitely did know that was going to be her final game. And that was emotional for majority of the squad, because bar 2 or 3 players, or maybe 4, at most 5 out of the entire squad, she'd given every other player their first opportunity. Yeah. So, I think that person always holds like a special kind of memory just to everyone who's had that experience. It's something very unique, and it's for, I would say, for all the players, something that they're most proud of in their careers, playing for your country, and especially at a major tournament, what we all were then at, and that to be the end of her sort of 10 years at the helm of women's football. And as you say, she transformed it. She had ideas that people thought were crazy, but that's just because she understood what top level sport looked like, and she had a desire to help us grow there. And there'll be people who disagreed with some of her tactics and things like that, but you certainly can't dispute that how she drove the game forward was exceptional.
Shelley Kerr takes over.
Mm-hmm.
Does she contact you before a squad to let you know that you're going to be the future captain, or is it when you turn up for the first squad?
It was before.
So you knew already?
Yeah.
How does that feel? To be told that you're going to be the captain of the country? Just off the back of our first national tournament, there was getting a lot of attention in the Scottish game. I know from doing my B licence that we were taken to watch Hughes play Belarus at Falkirk Stadium.
Right.
So the SFA were pushing this. It's actually the one thing, I'm very critical of them in a lot of things, but the one thing they really do well is promote the women's game better than they do the men's anyway. So it's really impressive. You felt it was getting pushed. Shelley comes in, you're made captain, you know it's going to be a big drive to get to the World Cup.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
I can remember the phone call. I can remember exactly where it was. It was just outside the gym I used to go to in Seattle. And I remember being so awkward on the phone. And then I remember she told me, and again, if someone tells you like face to face, there's some words that don't need to be said because your expression, your kind of physical response says it all. But like over the phone, you kind of need to portray that. And that for me was really hard, because I remember just having this like beaming smile on my face to be like, wow, like what an honor. But like, what do you say on the phone? And so it probably was just really awkward. But she told me at the time that her plan was I would be made captain and Kim Little would be vice captain. And obviously at that point in time I had a really, really great friendship with Kim. I've known Kim since I was 10 years old, maybe. And for a large part that we played against each other, but now we're very, very close. And that was just really exciting, because I think, to know that you get that role and that privilege, and to feel that someone's given you that responsibility because they think you're capable of handling it is, something to be very proud of. And I was just glad that there was going to be the two of us, able to work together and try and get the best out of the current squad, because it's, I think, really, really talented.
So do you then take over group admin rights of the WhatsApp chat and just remove everyone else?
I don't think I do I don't think that is me. I'm not sure who that is. I'm pretty sure it's not me though.
So the World Cup qualifying campaign was hugely successful.
Yeah.
Scotland qualified for the World Cup, culminating in, I'd imagine, I don't want to assume, the highlight of your career before the World Cup is the Hampden send-off.
Yeah.
against Jamaica in front of 19,500 captaining
That was great.
in Hampden. Yeah, I mean, it's bigger than most crowds of men game gets just now.
Yeah,
There was such a buzz about going to that game.
Yeah.
How did that feel walking out of Hampden?
Yeah, I mean that definitely is one of the highlights of my career for sure. I think what I will say on that though, like, I think the SFA, I'm not sure quite fully realised the support that was going to come. And I think they were a little underprepared, because my understanding is there was a lot of fans got stuck because there wasn't the gates, something to do with the number of gates that were opened, and like people stood in lines for ages. And however, I think just in the build up to that game, I remember having a discussion with the players group, and I was like, let's just do everything we can to make this a really big occasion, because I think it's something that could be really special, and I think it could be a big change, or turning point in home games and the women's A squad, and just starting to kind of open people's eyes up to the women's game in Scotland does exist, and there is a national team that does perform well, is going to major tournaments, and we can get behind that. And it's not about not getting behind anyone else or any other sports. It's, we're all Scottish and we love Scottish things, and let's be in it together. And so I remember we did a huge push as players. You know, people went back and spoke to primary schools, secondary schools, the development officers in their area, local club teams, and there's a good mix of people who come from all across the country. So we kind of cover quite a big area. Anyway, it was a huge occasion, and I think as much as that was great, I'm really glad the players experienced that, because I think we do such a massive job of always trying to push the game forward, that we rarely stop and have a moment of, let's actually just appreciate this and enjoy this moment. And I think that's one of the few moments in my Scotland career where I've been able to go, do you know what? That was just a really fun day. There's
another moment a week before that when FIFA announced a patch update to the FIFA 19 game, and let you know that the World Cup's going to be in it.
Right.
How does that feel? That would be my ultimate out of any football ability. If somebody told me I was getting put into FIFA the game, that'd make my life. That'd be me. Have you ever played it?
FIFA?
Yeah, as yourself?
No.
You've not. So
I don't think I've played FIFA since I was maybe 14.
You might want to send some strongly worded emails to the stats people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do I get a tough?
Your positional sense is fantastic. Your dribbling is really low. It's as if they've modelled you on like a Mertesacker. Like you'll always be in the right place at the right time, but don't expect too many mazes.
Two touch only.
But yeah, to me that was something. It felt like somebody did point out that it was a kind of afterthought, because the NBA had already done it with the women's college league, but it still felt like a nice moment when they decided to do something. World Cup opener versus England.
Yeah.
The buzz was ridiculous. These games are all going to be televised. We're all able to watch for ourselves. Watch them all. England they weren't favourites, but they were favourites to get to the semi-finals at least in the tournament.
Yeah. On
the build up to that, what's going through your mind? Obviously, you've got the Euro 2017 group game where we lost 6-0 to England.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any fear of that? Because there's still a lot of the same players that were involved in that squad that are still in the squad. How does Shelley go about preparing people for so many eyes on the national game? Yeah, no,
there was a lot of talk about that game, I think, from media outlets, the 6-0 and the build up to sort of that particular game. I think as players we knew that well, you don't know for sure, but there was a lot of things that were different. You know, I think that England game at the Euros was always going to be so tough for us. It was our first major tournament. We were missing arguably 5 starting players, which you play in England at virtually full strength. You're already up against it. To then not maybe have a great deal of depth and take out 5 of what are some of your best players was just an enormous task, I think. And so I think we were comfortable and confident that we'd accepted that game. We knew people were going to talk about it. We knew it had happened. we'd experienced it, we felt it, but we also knew where we'd grown in the past 2 years, and we believed in the players that we had. And so I don't think there was a fear of that happening again. I think this is another really tough challenge. England are one of the best teams in the world at the moment, but let's know what we're good at. We've worked hard, we've been solid, we've worked on things that we know we weren't good at beforehand, and off we went.
Yeah, so the England game, lost 2-1.
Yeah.
Japan game, also lost 2-1. There's a lot of chances at the end of that. Cuthbert hit the post. Cleveland obviously scored the goal that got us back in the game.
Yeah.
But because of the way the tournament was structured, we were getting into the last game knowing that if really all we had to do was win, because we hadn't conceded a lot of goals. We were only a -2, so a win was going to get us. The majority of teams that could have qualified for the third place were already at -5, 6 because they'd taken beatings off of the favourites. Yeah. So there was a good chance that all we had to do was win. I was actually in here. We didn't get to watch the game, so we were in here doing a podcast, and we've all turned off our phones because it's went to 3-0 and went, well, that's it. And when we left here, it was 3-2 with very little to go. What goes? I've never played at that level, but I've played in amateur football matches where you've conceded one goal and you've went, it's fine. Yeah. And then the second has went in, and no matter, nothing can prepare you for that. It's just panic stations where you go, we cannot throw this away. There's a lot of VAR, and that was for me that was the thing that bugged me a lot about the change in the rule during the tournament. Yeah. So they changed the rule during the tournament was after the group leaving your line as a goalkeeper was meant to be eyeballed by the ref and the ref only. Yeah. It wasn't meant to be a VAR decision. Alexander saves a penalty at 3-2, which would have got us through, but VAR reviewed that she's taken a half step off the line and it needs to be retaken, and they score and we go out. Is that the worst feeling of your international career?
It's a weird feeling because I remember just feeling numb. I remember thinking, this is probably the worst feeling for everyone that's out here right now. Like, you just have to get everyone together. I remember just thinking, you have to get everyone together. And I remember just knowing that. I was like, it doesn't really matter. Like, we're going to be criticised. We're going to be slaughtered in the media. People are going to have an opinion on it. Everyone's going to have an opinion on it. But the only thing we had comfort in was that at least we're all in this together. Like, we're not doing this on our own. It's nobody's fault. There's no blame on anything. This is just one of these things that we're all in this, and we've got ourselves this far, and this has happened, and let's just stay together, and let's know that you don't be on your own. Don't be silent. Just stay together. I remember that was just the message I said. And it did hurt, but almost the nature of it was so surreal. Like, I think, as you say that, I won't criticise the referee, because I think there was things she got wrong, but I think that happens all the time in football. Like, every game there's things refs get wrong. You can't always be like, that's the ref's fault. I think the harsh thing that we really were unlucky with was we got none of the VAR decisions that we could have got in our favour were. Right, I think for me, like, I can understand all the decisions that went against us. Like, was Lee off her line? Yeah, by half a step. Yeah. But okay, she was off her line, so that's how we're going to that level of scrutiny. So okay, like, yes, there was VAR to give the penalty in the first place, but I think even, like, you take the Japan game, we had two penalties that, like, I don't understand how, if those others are, and I think that was, of all the decisions, like, I think that's what I would say about the frustrations. It was like, we were harshly dealt with because every decision that could have gone against us did. Yeah. Whereas there was other teams who seemed to somehow get away with some things, and that was almost harder to take, because I think you kind of kept thinking, we'll have to get a break. Like, we'll have to get a break. One of these games will get a break, and we just absolutely didn't. And
is that the hardest part as a captain of a national side then, when something like that happens? Because with the way your season was structured at your club side, you were pretty much having to go back straight into club football. Yeah. So normally after a tournament, maybe you just get a bit of time to try and be with each other and discuss, but you're having to switch off, go straight back to club football. Is that, in that scenario, a curse, but also maybe kind of a blessing? Because if you look at the two games since in the qualifiers, we've dished out 2 absolute scuddings. So
Yeah.
everyone's came back, and it seems to be kind of like,
Ready
right,
to
no,
go.
we need to get back to this tournament again.
Yeah.
Because at first it was just get to a major tournament, then it was right, let's get to a World Cup. But now it's, no, we've been there.
Yeah.
We've
that's
scored
what's
goals,
next.
we've got points. We should really now push on, make sure we get to the next one,
Yeah.
and then take what we've learned and get through
Yeah.
the next group stage. Was that maybe a feeling? Because I think this crop of Scottish women's team, I mean, I've followed 3 campaigns now. This seems like the one where there's the most people playing professional football.
Yeah.
It's at a good age. I think I've seen Shelley Kerr say that when she first came into the job, I mean, she was first around it, there was maybe a core 20 people that she could call up, and now it's maybe pulling from a pool of like 50 to 60 players.
Yeah.
There's something literally just out today before you came over, that was saying that since that World Cup, participation's up 21% in the girls' game. So there's a legacy left behind from it. I guess instead of being disappointed, that's something to just be really, really proud of.
Yeah, there's an element of that. I think, as you say, though, a lot of the girls feel regret from that tournament, feel like they underachieved. And I think as athletes, those 2 things, I mean, for anyone, like no one likes to feel they regret something or they've underperformed. But when you put so much into it and you have this one stage to perform, you don't quite do it. I think the overhanging feelings are extremely intense, and you kind of have the choice. You either kind of let them burden you, or you say like, this needs to add to the motivation that we otherwise have to push on. And I think a lot of us do feel that, and we're like, right, okay, we now know what that's like, as you say. Now we need to get there, and we need to get there, and we do need to perform. And I think that shift in, even just that shift in mindset, I think is a lot bigger than people maybe are aware of or understand. And it would be hard to understand because there's probably not very much else that is comparable to something like that. But I think just that shift does, in things like qualifying, it does give you the motivation and the added edge and the confidence to say, we're number 1 seeds here because we've earned that. And a lot of us have been in for long enough to be like, this is the hard work that we've done over time, and now we need to go and show what that actually means. And I think we've done a really good job so far, albeit we've played teams and we've played games that we should have won. So the challenges still await.
Yeah, the mentality is a huge thing, especially if anyone who's watched Scotland's men team for the last 20 years. The mentality is huge. I have no doubts, but the type of players we have in the men's team, that if we qualify for this tournament, there'll be a steamroll of tournaments we'll qualify thereafter. It's just getting there first. Yeah. So Euro 2021, that's what we're going for next. Anna Segal's in charge of Finland just now.
Yeah.
So they topped the group, but they have played 2 games more.
Yes.
Because their campaign's already started. Looking forward to meeting up. Is that somebody you still keep in touch with at all?
Not too regularly. She certainly was in touch though during the World Cup, and as I've said, she's someone who, she gave me a huge amount of opportunity in my career, and I have so much admiration for her, and so yeah, that will be nice to see her, and obviously she'll be the enemy, but
I hope she doesn't like seeing you guys after the double header.
Yeah. She knows I can sulk, so she'll probably give me some space. No, yeah, I think there'll be the moment of let's be professional, and she'll be the same. And then I'm sure afterwards, it'll be really nice to see one another, and hopefully she's doing great. But
so, just I guess the last point is the future. So back in 2019 World Cup, you got a huge personal award, the Kate Linder. What's the right for Outstanding Academic and Athlete Achievement Award?
Yeah.
Back to Utah Royals. It'll be your first season without Laura Harvey as coach. She's went on to the US Women's National Team's job. Yeah. What are your goals for this season?
I mean, finish top 4. No, I think it's going to be tough with a new coach. There's an element of we're starting over again, but then there's also an element of that freshness that I think can galvanise a team. I think we'll have much the same squad, or certainly a core will be the same. And I think we'll have some great talent, and I think sometimes just any sort of change can drive a team forward. I also can do the opposite, but let's not talk about that. And so I'm really excited to get back into club football for one. You know, it's been a good break, but a longish break. So I feel ready to get back into that surrounding and put a lot of the hard work in before the season starts in April. And on an international standpoint, we have 6 games left and we have to win all 6.
And just beyond playing career, I'm not calling it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not calling it for you. Right? It's just, I know you've done your B licence.
Yes.
You've worked under Shelley Kerr, Laura Harvey, Anna Segal. I've seen you do the mic'd up stuff, so I've said before, you're very communicative, you're the leader with the captaincy. Is coaching something that you have an interest in doing, or is it just mindset? Because you said you were doing it at Seattle whilst you were playing as well.
Yeah.
Is the coaching pathway something you're going to look at? Are you going to go on to do your A licence and see where you go from there?
I'd certainly like to. I think it's something that if I have the opportunity and the time frame works, it's something that's I definitely would like to do. And I don't know whether coaching is something that will be in my future, but I think it's something I've grown to be really passionate about. And I think if you get the opportunity to do something like that, I think you absolutely have to grab it. And the SFA are in the process of pushing really hard to get more female coaches. And I think having been in the game, then, you know, I would like to in some capacity always have football in my life, and you don't kind of know what's ahead. There's a lot of different options, and I think by just adding that to the things that are on my CV and the things that I've done, then I think it can only be an advantage to me.
Well, I'll let you go and you can go watch the Celtic Glasgow City match. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck with the rest of the season and the Euro 2021 campaign.
Cheers, John.
Scots Abroad is written and produced by John Walker and Gary Black.